Hello and welcome to today's episode of Off the Track. Today we are doing a special collaboration episode with another podcast, the team Sonic Boom, who are from Germany and run a German language podcast about F1 in schools as well. And so, welcome, Sonic Boom. Today, the special guests joining us from Sonic Boom are Artie,
How's it going?
Arnis,
Hello.
Florian,
Hi there.
and Jacob.
Hello.
And we've got members of the Off the Track team, George,
Hi.
Jesse,
Yo.
and I'll be your host today, Michael. So, Team Sonic Boom, do you want to just start by giving us a quick, maybe, history on your team and the podcast, and maybe why you started your podcast?
So what we did was we had a lot of time after our virtual regionals because the nationals were postponed into September, and we thought, yeah, we should do something, and we had the inspiration of your podcast, and so we started our first episode, and just it went, and yeah, that was our basic idea to introduce our podcast, to introduce the competition to other students, maybe young people who don't speak that good English or don't understand English, and yeah, we had some guests on our episodes too. Yeah, and that was the basic idea for creating that podcast. Maybe Adi wants to add something to that.
Well, you started off. We started off basically out of inspiration from you. Some of us listened to Off the Track way before we even had the idea. After like our virtual finals, we literally had nothing to do for like 5 months. I think it's from March to
It
September.
wasn't that
From
much.
felt like that much. Um, so we thought, what could we possibly do to like fill up another page of the portfolio? I thought, how about a podcast? And we did an episode. We got a couple of views, and kind of we kept going.
So, how many episodes have you guys done?
Our fifth episode is coming. So, no, our sixth episode is coming. So we've recorded 6 but uploaded 5.
Okay, all right. Well, it seems like you guys have got a really good start to your podcast. And for those listening who do speak German, which I know is some of our listeners, because we have quite a sizable German audience, considering. The links to Sonic Boom's podcast will be in the description, as always. So,
And on that, also, they also, I as a non-German speaker, really get enjoyment out of listening to the translation that Google generates. It's not perfect, but it still gives you a wonderful insight into their team as well. So, I really couldn't recommend, even if you're English speaking, couldn't recommend it enough.
and how did you guys find the auto translation? Because you tried listening and reading the translation. Was it accurate?
It's weirdly accurate.
Yeah.
It is kind of. It butchers some of the things we're trying to say out of completely making it useless, but I think it's pretty accurate actually.
Oh, okay. Well, that's surprising. But that's good then. If you want a somewhat butchered interpretation of the Sonic Boom podcast because you don't speak German or you speak German poorly, like myself, then hop on over and turn on the captions. So our first topic today has to do with the competition structure in Germany. So, do you want to just give us a quick rundown of kind of how it operates for those viewers who aren't familiar?
Yeah, so the structure is in Germany that we have like a junior category, which is from, I think, which is until 13 years, and after that you have the senior category, and only the senior category can qualify for Worlds. But yeah, maybe to start off, you have regional finals at the first level, and yeah, in most times it's 2 or 1 team that qualify for the nationals in Germany. it's then you have nationals with a maximum of 16 senior teams and maybe 8 or 9 junior teams, and that's basically it. It's like only 2 to 3 teams qualify for Worlds, and on a national level, it's that you have 440 points, and 100 points from the 440 are the race time, and the rest is divided into pit display, portfolio, and presentation.
Right. Okay. And so, how many regional finals do you have in Germany?
It is about 10 or
Okay. Do they?
I would need to look that up.
Right. Do they base them off of the German states? Because you guys are a federation, aren't you?
Kind
they
of.
base them.
It's basically some states have more teams competing, obviously. So for Bavaria, it's usually not that much teams to make it its own championship. So the last couple of years, we just had a regional championship of Bavaria and like a couple other states. So we just get up to like 20 teams to have an actual competition, and it's like there are a couple of these collective competitions, but the rest is very similar to the states here in Germany.
Right. Okay. So yeah, for the Australian listeners, Germany has how many states is it in Germany?
16.
16 states in a country of 60 or so million people. I think
80.
Okay, sorry. 80 million people. So that's like double the amount of triple the amount of people of Australia and double the states basically. So it's kind of surprising that you don't do it on a state by state basis. Is it because F1 in schools is more concentrated in larger cities? Or
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
If you take Hamburg, for example, it's at least like 20, 30 teams that at every championship, no matter what. And in Bavaria, I think last year we had 4 teams in total.
Right. Okay.
I think it also depends on the industrial, on the companies around the teams. For example, there are very few teams in the east of Germany, but a lot of in the west of Germany, and we have also that thing that in North Rhine-Westphalia, it is that you have so many teams that they'll have a qualifying or qualifiers before even the regionals, so they have another level before
Right.
having regionals.
Okay. Interesting. So when it comes to you talked about companies around the areas, it kind of feeds into one of our topics that you've put down here is lobbyism. Do you want to explain kind of to our viewers what that is?
Basically, in Germany, like the complete upper north of Germany is sponsored by the Nordmetal Cup, it's called, where the competition is basically based on the F1 franchise, but it's marketed under this Nordmetal Cup name. So Formula One has a saying in most things, but I think it's very much based like on whatever this Nordmetal Cup wants it to be. I think I'm butchering it, the idea behind it, but yeah, most of the judges are kind of from this company, I think, also, and yeah, other than that, it's not really different.
Right. So they've kind of franchised out the running of F1 in schools to this company in
Exactly.
the north of Germany. Okay, that's.
Do you have the same rules, sort of like car technical regulations, in the south and
it's
north?
completely the same.
Oh, okay, yeah.
You just have another branding. The colors are blue, and it's just another branding. It's the same rules, but you have also that in the north of Germany compete more teams than in the south, and that company runs the competition.
It's basically just because of a lack of funding, I think.
Yeah, And there's another thing that the Chamber of Commerce in Northwest Germany runs the competition, the regional finals.
Right, that's an interesting way of running F1 in schools, because in the UK and Australia, it's all run by two different bodies, but one body for each country, isn't it, George? It's just run by F1 in Schools HQ.
Yeah, F1 in schools.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see whether it's like that anywhere else in the world. So, if there are any other different language-speaking podcasts listening at the moment, hit us up. But anyway, so when it comes to your presentation, your engineering interviews, and your pit display interviews, what are they like?
That's an important thing to mention, because we in Germany don't have engineering interviews. So you just submit a 20-side portfolio where you write about engineering and marketing and that stuff, but you don't really have an engineering judging. So some judges try to make that up by asking questions afterwards, after the presentation, but we only have a interview for the pit display and the presentation.
Right.
And the verbal presentation is just about 8 minutes long, so you really have to be strict on your timing on that.
And it is also that the judges, the questions that the judges ask after the presentation, they can't give you points for that. So it's
It's personal interest.
My question on that is so in the verbal presentation content for most countries, a lot of it's based on like innovation and collaboration. Do they talk about engineering? Is there like a focus on engineering during the verbal presentation, like marked criteria against it? Or is it more still based on like the kind of worlds-ish kind of verbal presentation?
I think there's no focus at all, actually. It's just trying to put like everything you've done into these 8 minutes, portraying it as effectively as possible. You mentioned innovation; that's a big part of it, actually, because like every team will say exactly the same thing at some point, and if you add things you have innovated on, it kind of leaves a mark with the judges. We have noticed, but it's just not really anything
that important. Yes, but
special
when
for
it
every
comes
team.
to the engineering interview, in Germany we just hand out in our cars for evaluation on Friday evening, and a jury will evaluate the CAD data in the cars overnight. So what is the engineering interview like?
So engineering interviews effectively, well, it's like a 20 to 40 minute interview where they discuss about your engineering portfolio and the engineering in general that you've done across the competition that you decide to do. Usually it's not well, I know for the worlds it's not really based on the engineering interview doesn't score you a lot of points. However, the engineering interview can lose you a lot of points because they can poke a lot of holes at your portfolio that they are questioning. But the engineering interview effectively is just 20 minutes where a team discusses the engineering exclusively, and they have to try and reach the criteria. George?
But how's that different from the scrutineering itself from the car?
How so?
I mean, it's basically just discussing how you did your car, how you built it, how you designed it. I mean that's basically what.
Right. I reckon. Wait. Do you have a scrutineering interview?
No, we don't.
No.
So, like, the differences are like, so say in this you discuss like why you made certain design decisions, or why say you've got a like in our case the lures, right, which might be a topic we discuss later. The lures, we discussed the innovations that we did with the lures and how we came to design decisions with that stuff that happens in the folio, but you can expand upon it more and discuss it. It's more two-way, so judges can ask questions about your content and you can show the judges your content, so it ends up being a relatively a two-way thing, and it's scored against the same criteria as the portfolio, but they're
I think it's really for the engineering judges to make sure they understand everything that you're saying and make sure that you understand what you've got in your portfolio.
yeah, that's part of that's our job to present the jury what are our innovations. Yes.
but not in an engineering
No.
interview for us. So we don't. But what I wanted to ask is, so how long do you have for the competition? Because do you have 2 days, 3 days, 4 days for your national or regionals? Because I think it's a lot of time if you have for every team a 20-minute interview on top of the other things.
So in the UK, our regional championships are just 1 day long, and usually things like the engineering interviews and the verbal presentations are shorter so that they can get through all of the teams in a day. But then our national competition is 2 days long, and the judges have a more opportunity to go into greater depth into the team's work.
In Australia, for both the states and nationals, and I think even the regional finals, they have 2 days of enterprise and engineering judging. So you end up, everyone has the same amount of time, and it's about 20-30 minutes, and they get through every team. They sometimes have multiple streams of judges, so they have different judges judging different classes or different competitors. But in most cases, it's pretty even, and there's not much variation, and they're judging to the criteria, so it doesn't really impact too much. But they definitely get through 20 or 30 minutes. It does take a lot of time, though. Their judges at work 10 till 6 usually sometimes.
And another thing about the off what you said, Florian, you said you presented to a jury about your car. Do you want to elaborate on that a bit more? Like, do you talk to the judges about your car when you hand it in at scrutineering, or is this just based on your portfolio and that kind of thing?
Yeah, that's just part of our portfolio and our verbal presentation. So we just present our innovations, but we don't have a scrutineering or engineering interview at all.
Right. Okay.
I think the closest thing to an engineering interview that we have is like the team box interview.
Fitness players.
It's not about engineering.
I mean, it's the closest thing where you get asked the questions about the car.
It's the closest thing because it's an interview.
Yeah, but it's kind of a shame. It's, in my opinion, it's a shame that we don't focus that much on the engineering as you guys, because I mean it's kind of the core of the whole competition, to design the car, to do the engineering, and to improve the car. And I think it's a bit not represented enough in the points we get.
In Germany here, I don't like it.
But what we have in our presentation is that the presentation is structured, the criteria of the presentation is structured into 4 parts, and those parts are presenting the final car, talking about team management, talking about marketing, and then talking about graphic design and CI. And so we try to present as much as possible in 8 minutes, but you can't talk a lot about why you designed certain things on a car because you only have 8 minutes.
Yeah, that's always a funny thing. Like when we try our verbal presentation, the first try is always around.
Don't talk about that.
No, it's always around 20 minutes on the first try, and then we repeat it 50 times or so, and then it's maybe around 8 minutes, but it's so cramped in the end into those small 8 minutes, but it works out usually.
I mean, it's good to hear that you guys actually prepared your verbal presentation and practiced it beforehand, because I'm looking at Jesse's face here and it's showing me that Infinitude definitely didn't do that.
Oi.
Uh-huh.
No,
yeah.
we literally spent 4 weeks preparing our verbals.
Uh-huh.
We literally used the same person that you did and then decided she wasn't good enough, so we got someone else.
Yeah, that was probably a good idea, I'm going to be honest. But teams have been... Odyssey, I know, definitely did not practice their verbals, and it's a theme with Australian teams sometimes, that they haven't practiced their verbals until the night before in a hotel room.
How much did you prepare your verbals, George?
I mean, we prepared, we were working on it for, we started working on it months before the competition, but the PowerPoint was still having small changes made to it the night before, because we were also the first presentation at Worlds, which was
You had a
Quite
PowerPoint the
interesting.
night before.
Yeah.
Sorry. Small tangent. The Infinitude PowerPoint presentation was not completed on the day of the competition. Do you remember this, Michael?
I do not.
Do you want me to elaborate?
I wasn't there, remember?
No, but do you want me to elaborate in this or?
Yeah, please do.
So okay. We outsourced the rendering of our car to Michael and another member of our support team who ended up being on Horizon, and we didn't tell him that we needed something. And we just asked him one night where it was, and we were in America, so the time delay is a bit different. So we asked him like, I don't know, but effectively it was a night before, and we had no content for the engineering part of our verbal presentation in any form of visual aid. So we ended up having to completely beg and use a lot of computing power. I think we ended up setting the render farm up at school to get it.
So, when it comes to your regional level, guys, did you have to submit your portfolio on Turnitin?
Yes, we had to submit it, and it was like for our regionals this year we had virtual regionals, so we had to submit everything virtually. But yeah.
Okay, and so was it checked for plagiarism, like against other teams?
That is a thing that no, in Germany they don't check for plagiarism. Yeah, so the judges only have like if it's a real a real regional or national final, they have 10 to 20 minutes for every portfolio, and they don't check for plagiarism. So
I don't think they have to officially due to the
they
rules,
don't have
but
to.
I think they do actually. I mean,
Yep.
if a portfolio is obviously plagiarized, they will act on it. I think that has happened in the past.
But they don't have actually the right to mark your portfolio less because they don't have evidence for you copying it. But it is a thing which you don't get a lot of points for because the judge just don't likes your portfolio if it's copied from somebody else.
Right. Okay.
Do you
Well,
guys
that
have
makes
a
sense.
problem with plagiarism in Australia? Or does it get checked?
Huge problem. Plagiarism in Australia is genuinely one of the biggest concerns of the competition. I can't elaborate on some things, but there are some things that I can talk about. Like our website is completely copied by another team. I'm not sure if it's still
They
up.
weren't an Australian team.
But and also our portfolios in the Australian circuit are readily accessible by a lot of teams. So we end up getting a lot of similarity in our portfolios to other teams, and then the perpetual cycle kind of just continues. Also one of our big problems is that the competition used to actually give out example portfolios of previous year's competitors. So we used to have like an example of the cold fusion, the rapid motion, and even I think the hyperdrive one was a folio that was in public domain. And what you ended up finding was that every single team copied the structure of about 3 or 4 different portfolios. So the structure and also maybe some of the content. So you ended up finding that there was a lot of plagiarism amongst the portfolios, especially in the competition.
And how did the judges like react to it?
I don't think that like back in the time where this was they've put stuff in place for like this season coming up, but I don't think in previous seasons they had much in place to stop teams just using whatever they could find.
It was pretty minimal, especially when I competed at the competition. There was no talk of plagiarism in the rules. There was no talk of plagiarism from the judges. There's nothing like that. I think one of the other issues Australia faces is that I don't know what it's like in Germany, but there are a lot of schools that are quite established in the F1 community in Australia who have for years been producing really high quality teams who win states consistently. They go to worlds, semi consistently and do well. And so you'll get a lot of teams at the state level. You'll see a lot of similarity between different Brighton teams because they're all mentored and brought up in the same environment, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and they can the portfolios are literally just, you can get them straight off a shelf and then read them instantly and have a 9 out of 10 portfolio without trying and understanding.
It's basically the complete opposite in Germany. Like portfolios are readily available, not because they are like plagiarized and put on the internet or something, but it's on the topic of the chemistry between teams. But most teams, if you ask nicely, you will get their portfolio.
It really surprises me that your like teams are so willing to. The chemistry between teams is like so strong that you'd be willing to give information, like share information between teams.
So in the UK, I don't think we have much of a problem with plagiarism. I mean, I've seen teams' portfolios which bear a sort of structural resemblance to other teams, but I don't think it's as such a big problem as it might, as Jesse, you seem to think it is in Australia.
Jumping back a bit to how you were talking about the team in Germany, do you guys talk to many other teams at the competition? What's the chemistry like? Is there a very standoffish relationship between teams? Are you very suspicious of other teams, or is there a friendly atmosphere between teams at the competition in Germany?
I think it's a very healthy relationship, at least between most teams. Maybe it's just because we had some teams on our podcast and we kind of have to get along with those at least. But most teams, like we at least at the competitions last year where we had like not virtual but real competitions, we talked to most teams and we get along with most of them. It's competitive, of course, but yeah, most of them are cool people, and we share the same passion for this project, and I think that's why we get along pretty good.
Yeah, something that I noticed is that the chemistry between teams going into nationals is better than going into regionals, at least at our regionals.
Absolutely.
Because it is that only one team gets in Bavaria, only one team gets to go to nationals, and so there wasn't mostly only one team gets to go to nationals. So we have a healthy relationship at nationals, but we had also some quite difficult relationships at regionals, because it's just like you try to compete and you try to win, but mostly, as Eddie said, it's a friendship like relationship. You get along well, you share the same interests, and just have nice talks.
The problem with our regional is that there's basically two schools in Bavaria that have competing teams. So you face off with the same two teams every championship, and it gets very competitive at times. We have one team at our school actually that we have yet to be defeated by them, but it's not as healthy as on a national level with them.
Yeah, it's just to have a competing team at your own school, which is also capable of winning, and having two teams that are capable of winning, that share the same rooms, that can copy from each other, is a little bit difficult.
So George, like this is a question that we probably want to ask. Like, what is it friendly or competitive in the kind of UK scene as well? Like, are teams willing to be a bit sharey, a bit talk about their stuff, or is it more treated seriously? Like, you're not here to be my friend, you're here to be my competitor.
I'd say it's a mix. I'd say everyone's generally friendly and courteous to each other. I don't think teams are quite keen to keep their work private, I think, until the competition. They won't go around sharing everything and saying what they're doing, which I think is just sort of a competitive element. But in terms of how everyone's still friendly to each other. It's not like you don't get everyone sort of sniping at each other and just generally you don't get teams reporting other teams for like small discrepancies they may see that they've broken or something like that. I'd say it's quite a good. I'd say it's a good atmosphere.
Is there a thing about reporting? Because I've never had a final where a team has reported
Well,
another
there's this
team.
infamous document in Australia known as the grievance form.
Grievance form in Australia is pretty much used by almost every team for any small niggle. So to give you a bit of backstory, the Australian competition is quite toxic between the teams that want to win. I don't know if I'm just speaking for myself, but we did not want to be friends with anyone there. The only reasons we would interact with teams was to get information out of them before the comp, and at the comp we were not there to be their friends. We were just there to get information to see how we could do better and what their weaknesses were, so we could really pick apart those. I'm not sure if we were all, it was just our team, but I think that's a consensus shared by at least a few other teams that I've been in and around. If Michael wants to expand on his thoughts on that.
I mean, I wasn't a very callous child, so I didn't feel that way. But I can see that being the attitude of some other teams towards us, especially the other team at Nationals from our school. But it can sometimes get a bit intense in the Australian competitions. Do you see some things like that, George? Do you have grievance forms in the UK, George?
I don't think we have. I don't think we have a set method if you want to report another team. It doesn't happen too often.
It's not just other teams. It's grievances with the judging process.
Oh,
and so if you feel like another team's not been judged fairly, like they've been judged unfairly in terms of like they weren't judged enough, or you feel like something should have been overlooked when it comes to your material, like LUR's legality or something, then that's what you use a grievance form for. Anyway, sorry, just to clarify that.
If you feel you've been unfairly judged, you can put in or if you feel like you didn't break a regulation when they say you have, you can put in you can submit an appeal. But if your appeal fails, you lose something like 20 points, which can be quite big. So at the our nationals, we considered it because we broke a critical regulation we broke it because we had a slight mistake in our engineering drawings, and some of the judges were like, "Oh, you could appeal that," but it was like, it's not really worth it if we lose 20 points. And
I mean, but like, then again, if you get the critical reg overturned, you would have won, wouldn't
we
you?
would have won, but it would have it could have gone either way. And when we were on the podium, Andrew Denford turned around to us and said, "I don't know how it would have gone, but I think it was really tight, so I think it's a good job you didn't submit the appeal." Because I think that mattered more, qualifying for Worlds.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you did well at the end, didn't you?
Yeah, it paid off.
So, but yeah, I think at a Worlds level, there are some countries that have leaders, and they can go against the spirit of the competition in ways that might or might not be appropriate for a competition with high school students.
I think some of these leaders just want to go above and beyond to create the best competition they can.
But there are certain countries, well, not certain countries. There are some. You are always going to come across teams at a world level that just purely want to win no matter what, and sometimes that they will go to every length possible to make sure that they find every little bit about you, and they're not there to be your friends. But at the Worlds, it's that most of the time you'll find that the chemistry is quite good between teams that are not from your own country.
But does it pay off to try hard like that?
For us, we didn't really have any communication with any of the teams in Australia that were going with us because neither of them really wanted to communicate more than, well, we didn't really want to communicate either. But and I think it kind of worked out well that way. Like, we weren't obsessed over what Zero or Fast Pace were doing. And I think when you start obsessing over what teams are doing and start looking at other teams, you start to lose sight of what's good for your own team. Because the challenge isn't just a one size fits all. Everyone has to do the same thing. One of the ways you can really get caught down this rabbit hole is with sponsorship posts and seeing how many sponsors a team has. You don't know their sponsorship methods or how much money they're getting from those sponsors, and it can be terribly misleading and make you feel very bad if you see a lot of sponsors that shouldn't be there or are very minimal contributors all the time. You can end up losing a lot of sleep over it. So yeah,
Is that getting so toxic in Australia? Because I never thought about, that team has 5 sponsors. We have 22.
No, I did actually.
we're not talking necessarily a toxic thing. It's more so like it's bad for your team's state if you're worrying about how many or worrying about other teams from especially your own country.
It's an opportunity cost as well. Having to think, investing the mental energy to think about what this other team's doing, or investing that mental energy in actually producing something that's valuable for your team, working on improving your car, working on making some more graphics, improving your website, whatever it is. You really just need to consider whether fretting over these other teams, which is generally an unproductive thing to do, is the best thing for you. Benchmarking against other teams is by no means a terrible thing, but you need to do it with a couple of tons of salt, because you don't have the inside view into their team. You don't know what's going on, like Jesse said. So you really need to, just look at it all with a grain of salt and pay more attention to your own work than the work of others. Does everyone agree with that assessment?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's very well said.
So, Jesse, you mentioned social media earlier. So, obviously, social media is, we've talked about this in previous episodes, becoming a far bigger part of competition. So, Sonic Boom, what was your guys' social media strategy, and what kind of emphasis is placed on social media in the German competition?
I should probably have something to say about that since I'm marketing manager, but I can really say that we had a strategy on our social media. I mean, we started off with Instagram, obviously, since every team had one of those. We added a website, and I mean, since then it's just.
No, we started with the website actually. That was the first thing, because we were searching for sponsors, and it was great to have a website where you could present who you are, because many sponsors look at that first rather than social media. And then we started having Instagram, and then it just developed. But we don't have a specific strategy looking at we don't have it yet, looking at which time should we post, or which audience we have, something like that. But we have.
I think the bigger emphasis was on quantity of posts than quality or time of posting or whatever.
Right. Yeah. I think it's when it comes to that kind of thing, I don't really want to get too deep into the theory behind social media. It's a triangle. You've got quality, you've got quantity, and you've got your timing. How quickly you can do it. And how quickly you want to do it, and you can pick like 2 of the 3, but you can't do all of them. So you guys, if you're going to nationals, right? At the moment, yeah. Are you guys developing a social media strategy, or is that something you don't want to talk about? That's fair.
I think it's very easy to get up in this rabbit hole of social media, because it's marked so little, and you have to put so much effort into actually having a full concept. And I think the biggest step towards a full like marketing concept is like a podcast. I think at the moment we put a lot of emphasis on that, but other than that, we try to stay constant with our Instagram feed. Our website is updated regularly, but apart from that, we try to focus on different things.
Well, and actually, I think that Instagram and like the website are like the most important things. I don't see the reason behind making a big and like well-designed Twitter account and Facebook maybe, because they're just
We have a
it's-
Facebook account and it's
yeah,
well
we have
designed.
one, but it's not like it's a
It
very
is.
important thing of
It
our
is.
team. Who is on Facebook?
We,
I mean, honestly.
we don't have a lot of audience on it, but it's basically just our Instagram posts
Right.
on Facebook. Maybe you don't know, Jacob.
Yeah, I know, but it's not the emphasis on Facebook in our team, because there is like not
I
the
love team
audience that we
arguments.
have on Instagram. Yeah, sure, always funny.
So, Artie, you said that social media isn't marked very highly in the German competition. Doesn't receive that much attention.
Yeah. There's no criteria for it at all. I think it's just it falls under marketing, and that's where it belongs in the portfolio and the presentation. But other than that, that's not really worth putting much more effort into it. Like I think you would talk about it in your enterprising interview, I think. But since we literally don't have that,
Our enterprise interview is quite similar to your team box interview, as far as I can gather, though.
Well, they used to be called pit display interviews, I'm pretty sure,
Yeah,
before they got renamed.
What we did for marketing, for having efficient marketing, was less focus on social media, of course, where any post is well designed and stuff like that, and we try to reach out to our audience. But what we did was we focused more on like getting sponsors, because that's the main thing for about marketing for us. So we went to
but we didn't really try to reach any sponsors through Instagram.
yeah, we went to exhibitions and stuff like that
Yeah.
to personally meet sponsors and present our project. And yeah, our marketing was really focused on getting sponsors, and through social media, getting sponsors through social media is very hard. So social media for us is more like something where we reach other young people from our school or who are interested in competing in F1 schools, just to present the competition, but less we try to reach out to sponsors.
That exhibition point. That's a good point. I don't think anyone has mentioned that in previous sponsorship episodes. George, Jesse.
No.
no, we'll probably touch on that on another episode, I reckon.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. So we talked about how obviously there's not that big a focus on social media in Germany. I think that brings us to a good segue into the differences between how the German competition compares to the world competition. Obviously, the UK one, George, the rules are just last year's world's rules.
Yeah.
So it really is just the same thing again, just with other countries in it, pretty much. When it comes to competing from the UK to Worlds, Australia's rule set is similar, if a little bit different to the Worlds, given we have a development class. Do you think the German competition is adequately preparing teams for the Worlds in terms of its emphasis on different parts of the competition?
From my view personally, I think it's you could say it's a great competition, but the main focus we don't have that main focus on engineering. Of course, the race time gets most of the points, and you also have a lot of points in your engineering part of the portfolio, but it seems like you you need to have in Germany to build up a great result. It is important not to focus not to focus too much on engineering, because we don't have that main focus on engineering like it's on Worlds. So we heard from other teams competing at Worlds that it is a lot much bigger focus on engineering.
With that enterprise focus, you think that makes it more difficult to make it at Worlds because you don't really have that strong engineering base?
I think it's a difficult question, because having to compete at Worlds, you need to be able to have that big funding, and to achieve that, you need to be strong in marketing. And I'm not sure whether teams would would compete easier if there was a focus on engineering at regional or national level. I don't know.
So, based on what Artie said about the German competition being a bit enterprise heavy, I may have a bit of a biased perspective on this, but I think the Australian competition has an enterprise lean to it as well. Would I be correct in that assumption, or is that just my view because I've been a graphics designer for so long?
I would say that it's actually quite an even split in the competition,
Yeah.
because I was breaking down the rules with a team that I'm mentoring a few weeks ago. I think it's actually 500-500.
Right.
So it's actually really evenly split. The difference is that the marketing, so say the marketing portfolio and the marketing
Yeah.
interview and the trade display and the verbal presentation are all deemed as marketing activities. So there's more marketing activities to do than engineering
Yeah.
activities. However, the actual split of points isn't too bad. Whereas, like, say there's only the engineering interview, the engineering portfolio, and the racing versus all the other enterprise stuff.
So, how's the world split between engineering and enterprise?
I think it's 50-50 as well, is it?
Is it, George?
Oh, I'm not entirely sure, but I think it's roughly close to that. I mean, because the racing is a quarter of the marks.
Right. Yeah.
And how do you split your teams? With us, it's 2 people on engineering solely and 2 people solely on marketing, with obviously the team manager doing everything. How did you manage that?
Yeah, so in Precision Racing, we split it. It was about half-half. So at Worlds, 3 of us were marketing. So Jackson, Lauren, and I took on the marketing side of it, whereas Ben, Jack, and Sukbir took on a half-half kind of role. So it was maybe 2.5 people for engineering, because Jack did a lot of the heavy lifting with the engineering Worlds. But I don't think ours is probably the best example. So what happened with Infinitude, Jesse? Do you want to explain that? George, you had an interesting setup because you only had 3 people. I don't know whether Sonic Boom realizes that, but yeah, they only had 3 people. So everyone did something at something, didn't they?
Yeah, we all just did whatever needed doing. It was quite an interesting setup. I mean, we all sort of had skills that we could relate to each area. But I think because we were a small team, we were able to communicate with each other very easily. So if we needed advice, it was pretty easy to get if someone knew more about something.
Okay. Yeah, that's that, and I suppose that also means that, when it comes to being handball questions, you don't have such a defined split between, an engineering judge handballing the graphics designer a question and then being like, I don't know, I just make it look pretty,
Yeah, but I think it's good because you can anyone in the team could be asked any question and should be able to give a reasonable response. I mean, I would recommend defined team roles, especially if you're a new team. I mean,
and if you're a big team.
Yeah, and if you're a big team. I mean, we have quite a lot of experience in our team, so we're able to work different areas of the competition.
And so, Jesse, how did that work with Infinitude? Because obviously, totaling it up, we had about 8 members, including supporting.
Well, we had an interesting challenge because we were an internal collab team. So, but we found that engineering teams, where they get bigger and bigger, the less input or the less control, like the more ideas that you bring into a circle for an engineering from an engineering perspective anyway, the less efficient you are as a department or as a kind of division. I think 1 or 2 engineers is usually a great balance. Like, not have the engineer do everything himself, but have maybe 2 to kind of share the workload and present different ideas. I think when you start getting to teams with 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 engineers, there are some teams that have 6 engineers with supporting members, and it ends up just getting really messy. And I mean, you might end up getting some really good results, but it's a really difficult process to work through.
I think that feeds into a theory of diminishing returns, where the marginal utility of an engineer when you add it to a project gets less and less because you need more overhead to manage the communication between members. I think you saw that with, George's team at Worlds, it's a 3-person team that pulled off the work that was done by 6 members from Horizon, 5 members from Cold Fusion. You can produce the same amount of work with 3 people. It just you're going to have a diminishing return every time you add a new person, because then you get more squabbling about ideas and that kind of thing. Am I hitting the nail on the head with this, Jesse?
No, I fully agree with that point. There is a way that more engineers and division in teams works, but the more people you have on the team, the more clearly you have to define roles.
Yeah. I think the role of a team manager presents itself far more clearly when you increase the size of a team.
And on an engineering point, engineering teams that are large can work, but you have to say one person just does testing, and that's their only job. They don't start to bring in ideas into it. I don't like the idea too much of more than 2 people working on the design and development of a car, though. But I think if you were to go down a route like that, like you have 4 engineers, you have to make sure that everyone isn't overdoing the same job, because you end up just wasting resources that could be spent doing marketing or doing other stuff. I still think 6 is definitely a good number. Like, I still think if you can have 6 members on your team and they're all contributing equally, the 6 members is still the best structure you can go for, because you've got the most manpower, the most man hours behind your project, and theoretically you can get the most done. But in practice, if you've got people that are doing the same jobs twice, it's not really that useful.
And don't underestimate the utility of some support members. They don't use well. In my case, I didn't do as much work as any of the members of Infinitude when it came to the competition. I'll freely admit that. But I was there to help Peter with any of his Illustrator things and all of the graphic design process, because he'd done it before, but needed, it was good to have my experience, I think. Would you say, Jesse, on that?
I value it.
Yeah. So don't underestimate the helpfulness of support members. Just don't expect them to be as productive, maybe, as a full member. But anyway, we've got a bit off topic with this.
We've gone off the track.
Yeah, a bit off the track.
Let me, guys, ask you a question. When it comes to engineering, I think you have different rules compared to the German technical rules. So I think since last season, you're not allowed to split your rear wings anymore.
No.
Do you?
So the wing has to be one. The rear wing has to be one constant span segment.
Yeah, and especially the exclusion zone. That's something we don't have in Germany. So I think your rules of the regionals and nationals are much more closer to the world final rules as we do here in Germany.
Yeah, I've noticed a few differences. Just look at cars like your body will come right up to the wheels, and I think also you can have smaller wheels.
Yes.
Is your limit 24 millimeters on the?
Yeah, that's.
Yeah.
24.
So you have smaller wheels. I think the German rules actually make slightly better looking cars.
Yes.
Generally.
I would agree with that statement. Yeah, there have been
agree,
some
yes.
absolute shock. I think the worst cars I've ever seen have been from Germany. There's in the show notes we're going to put some absolute shockers in in the description. We'll put absolute shockers there.
I was saying I thought there were lots of good German looking cars.
Oh, there's plenty
good
of
looking
really
German
good
cars.
German cars. There are very good ones, but I think they're also the ones that have created some of the worst looking ones.
There are generally teams that didn't make it to nationals.
Yeah, no. These are very low level cars.
Anyway, yeah. So obviously we talked about the balancing of the German competition. So do you think the points are evenly balanced, or do you think it's swayed towards Enterprise?
I think you have to take what I said with a grain of salt, just because I worked in graphic design this year in marketing. I can't really say it's not balanced. We have to put a lot of emphasis on both parts, especially right now, since of course our championship was virtual, and we have to get back on like an actual championship for September and nationals. But I wouldn't say it's not balanced. It's balanced differently, but not unbalanced.
Yeah, but I think what the Germans competition is lacking is that engineering interview, because you could write
Definitely.
pages with formulas and stuff on your portfolio, and the judge just has to take it as true, as the judge just has to say, yeah, you've done it yourself, and can't ask further questions. So you don't have that. If you mess up the engineering interview, you lose a lot of points. So that's maybe why you could say the competition is a little bit balanced into the engineering or enterprise part. But then also, if you mess up your race time, you don't really have a chance to win the competition. So
Or
it
if you
is
mess up the
balanced.
scrutineering, yeah, like we did.
So I've got a point in the show notes here about why you think Australia is dominating the competition so much. The question makes me somewhat uncomfortable because I don't think Australia is dominating, but I think we do well. I don't know, George, Sonic, what do you guys think? Do you think we're dominating the rest of the world?
I mean, when's the last time that Australia was not on the top 3 of worlds?
Last year.
Yeah.
Well, that was
Right, that was.
I mean, no, I get your point though. Australia's been, I think, on the podium like most years, apart from like 3. And
Yeah, so it was 2015 and 2019 are the only years that Australia hasn't been on 2007. It's the only time Australia haven't been on the podium. And we've won Best Engineered Car every year except for 5 years.
so I think that all comes down to something we discussed earlier with the information being passed down. There's a lot of information readily available to Australian teams, and there's a lot of mentoring that happens. It's a lot harder for teams to gain the understanding in other countries because it's a lot less freely available than, say, in Australia, where there's a lot more people willing to be very helpful, and there's a lot more people that are still always involved. From what I've gathered from talking to teams internationally, the kind of pass down of information isn't as as like content filled as in Australia. I
Because
realistically,
George, your school, you went to Worlds and this was your first. No, that's a different one. But like, how much experience does your school have with F1 prior to your Worlds win?
I mean, we were the first team from our school for 5 years before that. I think we did it when it first came out at our school, and then but we just did it for several years and built up the experience that way.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, because this year's podium we had 2 UK teams. I mean, I think a lot of that was just a good year for UK teams. We had 2 strong teams. I think because if you look back at the podium, it's a bit of there's not as many. We've got a few UK teams.
It's quite a few German
teams. The last 2014 was the last time we had a UK team on the podium, which was Colossus. I think there's less of a culture of passing down information. I know there is between schools, and you get some schools in the UK that consistently get through to Worlds because they've got a good system for mentoring the next teams. But I think that's less. There's less of a culture of it than it is in Australia.
If I may add something to something that Jesse said, if I get what you're saying, then there should be a trend of teams that newly adapted the competition in their country, that those teams would place the lowest. Usually, I would assume. Is it a case?
Yeah,
with,
most of the time, the
Worlds?
Worlds teams that come from new countries place quite low. I can't really think of many examples of teams really breaking that. I think maybe Abu Dhabi, their name escapes me. They got the best engineered car at our World Finals, but that I think they'd gone once before.
Nighthawks.
Nighthawks, yes, but I think the competition was still quite new to Abu Dhabi. It had only been set up for 2 or 3 years. Like, it wasn't their first year, but that kind of knowledge pass through didn't happen yet. But they were really good and they worked really hard, and they had a ICC that was really helpful to them. But I really think that a lot of this does come from the helpfulness of the ICC and the helpfulness of the teams and the resources around them. I think it's not. I'm not saying that you can't be successful without the help, because any team can be successful if they work hard enough and if they learn what they need to. But it's just you start at you can enter at a higher level when you've got that knowledge behind you and understand it at a higher level, so you can learn quicker throughout the competition.
I think we've covered most of that. Do you think that there's a connection between speaking English and doing well in the competition? Because I'm looking at the placings right now, and Germany actually has placed
consistently well
for the past, consistently on the podium for the past 7 years, with the exception of 2018 and 2015. Oh no, they won 2015. Sorry.
2012
with the exception of 2013.
Yeah.
No, 2018. What am I saying? Yeah. So, do you think there's a link between that? Because, like, Australia and the UK, Ireland, and that are all placing very highly, consistently. Do you think there's a link, guys, between speaking English and doing well in the competition?
I wouldn't say it's only the language part, but there is a connection. I think it starts just by discussing the technical regulations. I think just by understanding the regulations, and I think a English speaking team has it easier. But actually, we've never competed at the Worlds, so we don't know how practically it would be easier or harder. But yeah,
we talked about it with Team Fusion, second place at Worlds on last podcast episode. Actually, they said the hardest part to adapt to Worlds was understanding the rules. Basically, if you try to build a new car completely with the new rules, and you get a single scrutineering rule wrong, I mean, I don't have a clue what it's like on Worlds with the car, but you're screwed. I think, but that's like the hardest part, I would imagine.
I mean, it's not so much that you're screwed, because at my nationals there were only 2 teams, and one of them was ours, that didn't have a points penalty applied to their car whatsoever. So if you get a penalty, it's not the end of the world. If you hit a critical reg, or one of those proportional penalties now, or something like that, or safety regs, the really critical regulations, then you're pretty much done. But I see your point on being harder to understand the technical regulations. So do you guys find it difficult to interpret the technical regulations because English is your second language, or?
Yes, I think it's quite understandable, but yes, it's quite hard to find things you can but innovations you can put on your cars, but I think it's okay to go for us, yeah.
So thank you for listening to Off the Track. You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and newly YouTube. If you enjoyed this episode, you can rate the show on Apple Podcasts. Make sure to follow us on Instagram at Off the Track Podcast, and visit us
it really
at
helps us
offthetrack.net.
out, the rating on the podcast.
Yeah, it really does. Yeah. If you're visiting our website, you can find all our other socials, like Twitter. Let us know on any platform, or contact us at contact@offthetrack.net. It's our email address. Whether you want to see more collaboration episodes like this. Obviously, we had the interview with Evolve, and now we've done this collaboration. Not sure how many other F1 in Schools podcasts there are, but we certainly are looking forward to doing collaborations. So if you want us to do more collaboration episodes, let us know. If you're a team that wants to do a collaboration episode, hit us up. And check out Sonic Boom on YouTube. They seem to produce some pretty quality content as well. So the links will be in the